Kawisay agaw kun sa kayo amin. A pleasant day to all of you. I am Pia Making Malayaw, and I am an indigenous Bontoc Igorot from the Mountain Province, which is in northern Philippines. I am part of CAMP. It is a National Alliance of Indigenous Peoples organization here in our country. And I hope to share with you what Christian love is from a militarized context and from the experiences of our communities throughout the country. But to begin with, let me share to you some basic information about the indigenous peoples in the Philippines, as well as our brief history. In terms of population, we have a total population of 14 million. Roughly, we comprise about 11 to 14% of the total Philippine population. Geographically, the indigenous peoples in our country are divided into 8 major groups. So we have there the communities in the Cordillera Mountain Range, in the Cagayan Valley region, in Central Luzon, within the Sierra Madre Mountain Ranges, the island of Mindoro, the island of Palawan, the island of Panay, and as well as nearby islands in the Central Visayas. And most of the indigenous peoples are found in Mindanao, that's in southern Philippines. The indigenous peoples of the Philippines were born of colonization process. What is known now as Philippines used to be islands populated by communities of various ethnic origins. When the Spaniards came and colonized the archipelago in the 16th century, many of these communities, especially those who lived in the fringes of the mountains, were further pushed deeper into the hinterlands. The Spanish colonizers imposed the Regalian Doctrine. This is similar, if not the same, to the general doctrine of discovery, which also declared the entire Philippines as owned by the King of Spain. However, some of the communities, such as the Igorots in the northern Philippines and some Lumad communities in southern Philippines, were able to defend their territories using their traditional defense units who guard the ancestral domains against land grabbers and other intruders. During the post-colonial government, the Regalian Doctrine was retained. The Philippine Constitution declares that all resources in our lands, in the Philippine territory, are owned by the state. On the other hand, the Constitution also recognizes the rights of indigenous cultural communities, but within the context of national unity and development. For us indigenous peoples, the ownership of land can only be derived or can only be acquired from the actual labor that you're going to give or you're going to input on the land, the actual improvements that you make and development that you make for the land, for the people. And for indigenous peoples, we view land as something that we have borrowed from the future generation. Therefore, while utilizing the land, we should be able to maintain this land, gather its gifts, but be able to return it to those who own it, the future generation. So that's how the sustainability of our communities, of our relationship with the environment works. For us indigenous peoples, land is our life. It is the source of our livelihood. It is where our culture and political structure is deeply rooted. And on the other hand, for the state, the right to land can be acquired. It can be sold. It can be bought. The value of land is only seen through its monetary and commercial value. Everything is so segmented that you can just sell off the trees, the logs. You can just block off the rivers and build a mega dam for electricity, which will be utilized by private corporations. You can just extract every mineral resources which can be found. Uh, and even the people, you can exploit the people to gain more income from that. So to date, we, the indigenous peoples, are denied of our rights to our ancestral land and resources and our traditional democratic self-rule. So if we would look at the issue of mining, with liberalized mining institutionalized by the Mining Act of 1995, which practically allows for up to 100% foreign ownership of our mineral resources and our mineral lands, actually poses the biggest threat currently to our rights to ancestral land at present. CAMP has already accounted at least 251 approved mining applications, which covers about more than 500,000 hectares of ancestral lands. This is about 50% of the total approved mining applications in the country. The mining industry in our country is dominated by transnational corporations, which actually results to massive destruction of ancestral lands and livelihood, death of our rivers, the plunder of our mineral resources, and contributes only a few to the employment, both national and local, and also to the genuine and sustainable development of our communities. Large energy projects are also one of the development aggression that we are facing as communities. Energy projects also thrive as economic programs of the government prioritizes the privatization of energy industry. Today, there are at least 27 hydroelectric dams that has been built, under construction, or in the pipelines, which will submerge several indigenous communities. Just for example, Pulangi Dam in southern Philippines, in Mindanao, will affect 23 villages of Lumad and Moro people. Halaor Dam, on the other hand, which will be built in the central Philippines, will be affecting 13 villages of indigenous peoples, and that's about 17,000 indigenous peoples. Land is also being converted into monocrop plantations, such as the 20,000 hectares oil palm plantation of A. Brown Company in Bukidnon in Mindanao, which encroaches the lands of the Higaonon people. In part of Luzon, southern Luzon, the oil palm plantation in southern Palawan covers 7 towns, which are mostly inhabited by Palawan indigenous peoples. What could be the response of the indigenous peoples communities when these kinds of threat to our lands and our lives and the future generations' lives is happening? Well, the assaults made to indigenous people's rights were countered with resistance in defense of our collective rights amid the attack to our social economic rights and security. Some of the example of our resistance is the People's Barricade in the province of Vizcaya against several mining corporations like the Royalco Mining Corporation, FCF Mineral, and Oceana Gold Corporation. Another focal point in the indigenous people's recent struggle, is the food protest of the survivors of some of the most recent typhoons which has hit southern Philippines in December 2012 and in central Philippines just November 2013, which affected at least 15,000 indigenous people's families in the said area. Indigenous peoples led and participated in one of the biggest food protests in demanding for just relief and rehabilitation. Many other acts of defiance against mining, energy projects, militarization, and other issues were made by indigenous peoples in form of campaigns and protests in a community as well as in urban centers. Several communities actually have already declared their unity to defend their ancestral lands, uh, which are at risk of mining, and to call for the repeal of the Mining Act of 1995. Another highlight of the indigenous people's struggle against mining plunder is the Pangayaw, or tribal war, being waged by the Blaan people in the SMI Extrata, which is now Glencore mine site in southern Philippines, which is considered as the largest foreign investment in the Philippines. Hopefully, these give you a picture why our communities are militarized. First, they have clear interest in our rich lands, and second, we are resisting and struggling to assert our collective rights over these lands and for our self-determination. In the course of defending our ancestral territories, the indigenous peoples who oppose to sell out their lands are faced by heightened militarization in their communities. It has become actually a common practice for government agents to brand the indigenous peoples as rebels, supporters of guerrilla groups, or even terrorists. To give you more sharing about my personal experience, my grandmother was a part in the mid 1970s up to the 1980s. My grandmother was a part of a wide people's movement which was headed by indigenous peoples communities who are opposing the World Bank's construction of a mega dam along the Chico River. She was one of the women leader in our community who stood up against the fascist dictatorship under the martial law, and who also felt harassment and intimidation from the state's armed forces. Starting in the late 1980s, my mom also got active in indigenous people's movement to defend our ancestral lands and to advocate and to advance a development work from the people for the people. Even after the martial law, the attacks to the civil and political rights of the people continued, but this time under different counterinsurgency programs. My mom actually has been also included in the government's order of battle list, which targets to pacify or liquidate the civilians who are legitimately fighting for their collective rights. It is actually the persistence of those who were ahead of me. They're persistent to defend our rights and to stand for a dignified life of the future generations, which inspired me to know more about our culture, the issues of our communities, and even other communities, and to actually be part of a collective struggle for our ancestral lands and self-determination, despite the attacks of the government to its people. Under the Operational Plan Bayanihan, which is the government's current counterinsurgency program, the indigenous peoples continue to live a destructive cycle of dislocation, forced eviction, harassment, massacre, bombing, and other forms of grave human rights abuses, while corporate businesses continue to intrude our ancestral lands. Oplan Bayanihan goes in tandem with the administration's or the government's economic program by all intents. It is a program to quell the people's defiance of business interests and suppress the legal people's movement that demands meaningful reform and social change. This results to the violation of civil political rights of as well as indigenous peoples. Like the previous administration, the Aquino government has used state armed forces to quell the resistance of the indigenous peoples and targeted members, leaders, and even communities. There have been 39 documented killings of indigenous people since Aquino held power in June 2010 until December 6 of 2013. Out of these 39 individuals, 6 were children of indigenous peoples leaders. 5 were women, one of which was pregnant at the time of her death. For the past 3 years, camp has also recorded 16 incidences of forced evacuation um, of indigenous peoples involving an approximate of 9,754 individuals, including peasant settlers. These evacuations happened in several indigenous communities in 5 provinces in Mindanao, southern Philippines. Just last year, there have been bombings in 2 communities in northern Luzon. The bombing destroyed farms, irrigation facilities of Igorot tribes, and caused trauma to the residents, especially to the children. The filing of trump-up charges against leaders and members of organizations leading to the people's struggle against destructive projects, militarization, and other issues pertaining to indigenous people's rights and welfare is a trend in the past years. 37 members of MAPASU, it's an organization which means persevering struggle for next generation, from Manobo tribe in Mindanao, were charged of rebellion, frustrated murder, arson, illegal possession of firearms and explosive, and malicious mischief. The meritless case was meant to harass, intimidate, and inconvenience. They led the people's struggle against mining encroachment and human rights violation committed by state forces. Similarly, in Bangkayan, in Luzon, more than 100 community members were slapped with trump-up charges in relation to the community's opposition to the Lepanto Mining Corporation's pending expansion, among the other environmental issues and of workers' rights. In Nueva Vizcaya, a temporary restraining order acquired by Royalco Philippines Incorporated was served by the police and military to the barricade sites, ordering 15 leaders of the barricades to desist in participating in maintaining the barricades. So, from all these experiences, how do we define love? I think from our history, our experiences, it's showing the greatest respect to Mother Earth, our ancestors who have went ahead of us and have developed and defended our lands for the next generation. And love is the continuation of this great tradition for the next generation. Love is about caring for your brothers and sisters, your community, and majority of the people in your society. Love will flourish not just by ending the militarization of our communities, nor by the simple absence of violence. It is in our search for social justice and genuine recognition of our collective rights to ancestral land and self-determination that we find and develop love. So, as to end this brief sharing with you, I would also want to share with you some of the words of our women elders in our community. She says that the generation of my people have nurtured, protected, and defended our lands for many centuries now. Our people resisted hundreds of years of colonial rule. We have struggled against those who consider our lands only as resource base. Today, we continue to fight and struggle against these oppressors. We will not allow our resources to be further exploited. For us, land is life. This land is what kept generations of my people alive. This land is where we are going to die. Again, thank you very much, and I hope that you can join us in our campaign to stop the killings of indigenous peoples and to immediately repeal the operational plan Bayanihan, which is in disguise of peace and development, which actually is still continuing to violate the civil and political rights of the indigenous peoples, which is very linked to the economic interest in our ancestral lands. And of course, to give justice to all the victims of human rights violation. Again, agyaman ako unay kanda kayo. I thank you all.